Identical symbols appear in Egypt, Sumeria, and Mesoamerica, with no known contact.
Ancient carvings show beings in helmets, flying craft, and impossible technology. Mainstream archaeology calls it coincidence. The patterns suggest otherwise.
What did ancient artists witness that they felt compelled to record forever?
Welcome to Sapiens Untold. If you enjoy these explorations of humanity's mysteries, please like and subscribe. Where are you listening from tonight? It's dawn at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, and you're standing among 11,000-year-old megaliths that shouldn't exist, according to our conventional understanding of history. The air is cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of ancient dust, as the first rays of sunlight paint the rugged limestone pillars in hues of gold and amber. You run your hand along the smooth, weathered surface of a T-shaped monolith, feeling the undeniable weight of time etched into its grooves. These massive stones, some weighing up to 20 tons, are intricately carved with precise, often enigmatic symbols, scorpions, boars, foxes, snakes, and abstract geometric patterns, including a recurring H shape. Mainstream archaeology interprets this site as the world's oldest known temple, a monumental undertaking by hunter-gatherer societies that predates agriculture and pottery. It suggests that complex ritual and social organization, previously thought to arise after settled life, actually spurred people to gather and build. The carvings are seen as potent religious iconography, possibly representing totemic animals, celestial bodies, or early spiritual beliefs that bound these communities together. The precision of the carvings, though remarkable for the era, is attributed to ingenuity and collective effort using basic stone tools. However, alternative researchers propose that the sheer scale, the architectural sophistication, and the abstract symbols found here challenge the established narrative. They point to symbols like the enigmatic H figure, which appears with striking consistency, as potentially representing more than just abstract art. Could these intricate carvings, found on stones erected thousands of years before the pyramids or Stonehenge, be a form of forgotten language, a blueprint of knowledge, or even a record of experiences passed down from a pre-cataclysmic civilization? The striking similarity of certain complex geometric symbols across continents, appearing in later, supposedly unconnected cultures, suggests a deeper, shared origin or influence that conventional explanations struggle to account for. You marvel at the precision with which these massive pillars were quarried, transported, and erected by people we often label as primitive. What compelled these ancient builders to invest such immense effort in creating a sanctuary adorned with such specific, repeated imagery? Were they documenting what they saw, encoding knowledge, or commemorating an event that has since been lost to the annals of time? Are we alone in having visited Earth, or have others left their mark in our most ancient art? The midday sun at Göbekli Tepe now casts sharp shadows, defining the intricate carvings on Pillar 43, often called the vulture stone, within enclosure D. You lean closer, examining the relief sculpture, a tableau of various animals and symbols. Among them, prominently, you discern a distinct, small, rectangular object with an arched handle at its top, resembling a modern handbag or a bucket. It's a precise and recognizable form, unlike many of the more abstract patterns. Mainstream archaeology interprets this handbag symbol, along with others at Göbekli Tepe, as part of a complex iconographic system, perhaps representing a container for sacred objects, an animal's pouch, or a stylized depiction of a celestial body or ritualistic implement. The symbol's presence here, dating back 11,000 years, is often seen as a localized, indigenous creation, a unique expression of the early hunter-gatherer worldview, with any similarities to other cultures being coincidental or attributable to universal human symbolism. However, alternative researchers propose a more profound significance. They highlight the striking similarity of this exact handbag symbol found across continents and millennia. You might recognize it from Sumerian cylinder seals, clutched by figures identified as the Anunnaki, and depicted repeatedly in the art of the Olmec civilization in Mesoamerica, held by figures often associated with power or divinity. The object in these disparate cultures maintains a remarkably consistent appearance, a small, sturdy container with a distinctive handle, almost as if it's a specific item rather than a vague concept. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the near-identical complex symbol appearing in cultures with no known contact, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. The recurrence of this specific emblem raises questions. Is it merely an independent invention of similar ideas across the globe? Or does it represent a shared, forgotten knowledge, a universal tool, or even a literal object carried by beings who once interacted with these ancient peoples? What did ancient artists truly witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of this peculiar handbag in the hands of their most revered figures? The desert sun beats down on the vast, sculpted landscape of Tassili in the Algerian Sahara, where ancient sandstone formations rise like colossal, weathered sculptures. You step into the cool shade of a rock shelter, the air still and heavy, and your gaze immediately locks onto the incredible rock art adorning the ancient walls. Among thousands of depictions of animals and humans, your eyes are drawn to the enigmatic, round-headed figures, paintings dating back as far as 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, during a time when this region was a lush savanna. You examine the famous, great god of Sefer, a towering figure whose head is perfectly spherical, devoid of discernible features, and seamlessly connected to a broad, dark body that appears almost monolithic. Other figures nearby share this unusual characteristic: large, round heads, often without eyes, nose, or mouth, sometimes accompanied by strange, almost padded, body forms or antenna-like protrusions. These figures stand in stark contrast to the more naturalistic depictions of herders, hunters, and animals also found across the plateau. Mainstream archaeology interprets these round-headed figures as highly stylized representations of humans, possibly shamans wearing elaborate ritual masks or headgear, or perhaps deities central to the spiritual beliefs of these prehistoric people. The exaggerated proportions and lack of facial detail are often attributed to artistic convention, religious symbolism, or even an attempt to depict altered states of consciousness during rituals. This perspective suggests that these figures are an imaginative creation born from human spiritualism and cultural expression, a localized artistic tradition. However, alternative researchers propose a different interpretation, that these are literal depictions of non-human beings, or humans wearing advanced protective gear, such as helmets or spacesuits. The consistent, anatomically unusual features, particularly the perfectly round, featureless heads and bulky bodies, strike some as remarkably similar to modern concepts of extraterrestrial visitors or astronauts in specialized equipment. They question why, if the artists were capable of depicting highly detailed and realistic animals and humans, they chose to portray these specific figures in such an alien and distinct manner. The mystery deepens when considering the sheer volume and consistency of these depictions across a vast, isolated region. What did these ancient Saharan artists truly witness that compelled them to create such a unique and recurring imagery? Were they inspired by indigenous visions, or by encounters that transcend our current understanding of prehistoric human history? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The flickering glow of an old oil lamp casts long shadows across ancient texts and ethnographic notes scattered on a sturdy wooden table. You're not in a remote desert today, but immersed in the quiet hum of an archive, tracing threads of human memory through the spoken word, connecting them to the enigmatic symbols etched in stone. Your focus narrows to the Dogon tribe of Mali, renowned for an astonishing depth of astronomical knowledge passed down through generations. You read accounts of their cosmology, which describes a star called Potolo, invisible to the naked eye. Their traditions speak of this star being incredibly dense and small, orbiting a larger star, Sirius, in an elliptical path over a 50-year cycle. This Potolo is, in fact, Sirius B, a white dwarf star whose existence was only scientifically confirmed in 1862 and accurately described using advanced telescopes and astrophysics much later in the 20th century. Furthermore, the Dogon speak of a third star in the system, Sirius C, which remains largely theoretical for modern astronomers. Mainstream ethnography interprets this precise astronomical knowledge as possibly the result of cultural diffusion. It suggests that, at some point, the Dogon may have encountered explorers or astronomers from technologically advanced cultures who shared this information, which then became integrated into their oral traditions. Another view posits that careful, long-term observation, combined with a unique cultural emphasis on celestial bodies, could have led to these insights through entirely indigenous means, even without optical instruments. However, alternative researchers propose that the Dogon's impossible knowledge of Sirius B, and even Sirius C, points towards an ancient, forgotten source. They argue that the detailed and accurate description of an invisible star's properties and orbital mechanics, verified by modern science, strongly suggests either a surviving fragment of a lost, advanced pre-civilization's knowledge or direct contact with beings possessing superior scientific understanding. The Dogon themselves speak of the *Nomo*, amphibious beings from the Sirius star system who descended to Earth in a chest, or ark, and imparted wisdom. The striking similarity of advanced astronomical knowledge appearing simultaneously in cultures with no known contact, like the Dogon, or the depictions of impossible celestial maps in ancient temples, challenges conventional timelines of human intellectual development. How did ancient peoples know astronomical facts only confirmed by modern science? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The cool, dry air of the Seti I temple at Abydos in Egypt envelops you as you step into the hypostyle hall, the colossal stone pillars rising around you like an ancient forest. Your gaze sweeps across walls covered in thousands of hieroglyphs, a vast library carved in stone, depicting rituals, gods, and historical narratives. Then, in a specific section, high on a lintel, your eyes catch an anomaly, a series of carved images that seem startlingly out of place, almost eerily familiar. You lean in closer, examining the details. One glyph unmistakably resembles a helicopter, complete with a fuselage, tail rotor, and main rotor blades. Adjacent to it, another appears to be a submarine or a sleek, modern aircraft, and a third, perhaps a tank or some form of futuristic land vehicle. These images, dating back over 3,000 years, are strikingly clear, almost like blueprints for technology that wouldn't exist for millennia. Mainstream Egyptology interprets these Abydos glyphs as an example of a phenomenon known as a palimpsest, where one layer of hieroglyphs was carved over a previous one, and the erosion of plaster and subsequent recarving created an accidental optical illusion. This process, called recarving or over-inscription, happened frequently in ancient Egypt as pharaohs modified monuments. The unusual shapes, from this perspective, are merely the result of overlapping text, with our modern minds superimposing familiar contemporary objects onto ancient, unrelated symbols. However, alternative researchers propose that the extraordinary clarity and distinctness of these images are too specific to be mere coincidence. They argue that if these were simply eroded symbols, the resemblance to advanced technology would be far less precise and consistently identifiable. They suggest that these glyphs could represent a literal depiction of ancient flying craft or advanced machines, either observed by the Egyptians or even utilized by a forgotten civilization or visitors. The striking similarity across continents, where flying craft are also described in ancient Indian texts like the Vimanas, suggests a shared, forgotten history of aerial phenomena. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the almost photographic detail that our modern eyes perceive in these ancient carvings. Are these purely coincidental formations, or do they hint at a deeper, more unsettling truth about the world ancient Egyptians inhabited? What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of flying objects and technological devices? You stand again in the temple of Seti I at Abydos, the air thick with the scent of aged stone and the faint, sweet perfume of offerings from centuries past. This time, your focus is less on individual shapes and more on the process, on the very stone where the helicopter glyphs are found. You observe the texture, the subtle differences in depth and weathering that hint at layers of craftsmanship and time. The area of the controversial carvings is small, a limited section on a massive lintel, yet its impact on our perception of ancient history is vast. Mainstream archaeology interprets this phenomenon as a straightforward example of ancient Egyptian recarving practices. Hieroglyphs were frequently chiseled into plaster over earlier inscriptions. When this plaster eventually eroded away, the underlying carvings, meant for a different pharaoh's cartouche, or royal name, became visible and merged with the surface layer. This superimposition of two distinct sets of symbols, viewed through a modern lens, creates the illusion of advanced technology. For example, the helicopter image is explained as a combination of two original hieroglyphs, perhaps an arm and a hand, overlaid by the symbols for Kepa, scarab beetle, and Ba, soul, whose combined negative space forms the uncanny shapes. However, alternative researchers propose that while palimpsest is a known archaeological phenomenon, the specific and recognizable forms at Abydos are too precise and too evocative to be dismissed solely as an accidental illusion. They argue that the human mind is adept at pattern recognition, and for so many distinct technological shapes, a helicopter, a submarine, an aircraft, to emerge by pure chance from random overlapping hieroglyphs stretches credulity. They question why these particular accidents appear with such clarity, suggesting instead that the original symbols, or perhaps even the underlying ones, were themselves inspired by actual observations or knowledge of such devices. The mystery lies in the remarkable specificity of the forms. If these are indeed purely accidental overlaps, why do they so consistently resolve into shapes that defy the technological capabilities of the ancient world? Are these depictions merely a trick of the eye, or a tantalizing glimpse into a forgotten past where advanced knowledge, or even visitors, left their mark on ancient Egyptian art? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The arid wind whispers past the small aircraft's fuselage as you gaze down upon the vast, flat expanse of the Nazca Plateau in Peru. Below, etched into the reddish-brown earth, are the colossal Nazca lines, an astounding collection of geoglyphs created by the ancient Nazca culture between 500 BC and 500 AD. From this aerial perspective, the true scale and intricate detail of these desert drawings become breathtakingly apparent. Your eyes trace the sweeping lines of the spider geoglyph, a sprawling arachnid form nearly 150 feet long, rendered with incredible precision. You observe the remarkable craftsmanship, lines formed by removing the darker, iron oxide-coated rocks from the surface, exposing the lighter soil beneath. These lines are consistently straight and true, some extending for miles across the undulating terrain, yet they only reveal their complete forms when viewed from hundreds of feet above. The Nazca lines include not only zoomorphic figures like the spider, hummingbird, and monkey, but also intricate geometric patterns and long, perfectly straight trapezoids. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Nazca lines as elaborate ceremonial pathways, astronomical calendars, or intricate water-finding systems. For instance, the spider is believed by some to be connected to constellations or to represent fertility and rain, its position aligning with specific celestial events. The necessity of aerial viewing is often explained by suggesting that the Nazca people may have used hot air balloons, observation platforms on hills, or simply understood that the full design was for their deities in the sky to see, not for themselves on the ground. This perspective emphasizes indigenous ingenuity and religious devotion. However, alternative researchers propose that the sheer scale, the need for an aerial perspective for comprehension, and the incredible precision of these lines hint at an external influence or a forgotten technology. They argue that designing such vast and complex figures without a means of directly observing them from above would be an almost impossible feat for a civilization without flight. They suggest the Nazca lines were designed either as landing strips or navigational aids for flying craft, or as messages to beings who could view them from the sky, possibly extraterrestrial visitors. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise geometry and monumental scale, especially considering the limited tools of the Nazca. How did ancient peoples create such vast and accurate designs that could only be appreciated from an impossible height? What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery? The dry desert dust of the Nazca Plateau sifts through your fingers as you stand on the ground, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the geoglyphs. The vibrant light of the afternoon sun highlights the subtle depression of the lines, formed by the careful removal of dark surface stones to reveal the lighter earth beneath. You try to imagine creating the enormous, precise figures that stretch for hundreds of feet around you, yet are utterly incomprehensible from this ground-level vantage point. From here, you see only shallow trenches and scattered rocks, not a complete image. Mainstream archaeology meticulously studies the methods the Nazca people could have used. They propose that a combination of simple tools, stakes, ropes, and surveying techniques, allowed the Nazca to scale up small designs into these vast geoglyphs. For instance, grids may have been laid out, or central points established, from which lines were extended using taut ropes. They suggest a deep understanding of geometry and a highly organized labor force were key. The ability to create these designs without seeing them from above is attributed to an impressive terrestrial surveying skill, akin to modern civil engineering, but achieved with far simpler means. However, alternative researchers point to the extraordinary precision and perfectly straight lines, some stretching for miles over uneven terrain, as evidence challenging conventional explanations. They argue that maintaining such perfect alignment and proportionality across vast distances, without the benefit of aerial observation or advanced surveying equipment, would be an almost insurmountable task. The sheer complexity and uniformity of the designs, appearing simultaneously in cultures with no known contact, suggest a level of planning and execution that transcends basic tools and ground-level perspective. They question whether stakes and ropes alone truly account for features like the perfect arcs or the complex, interlocking patterns that compose figures like the monkey or hummingbird, which remain distorted and unrecognizable from the ground. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precision of these geoglyphs when viewed from the ground. How did ancient peoples achieve such monumental accuracy for designs meant to be seen from the sky, without the technology to see them themselves? Are these intricate terrestrial artworks merely religious offerings to sky gods, or were they messages, or even landing markers, for beings who could observe them from above? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The desert air cools as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the towering canyon walls of Sego Canyon, Utah, in deep reds and purples. You stand before a vast rock art panel, a canvas of time stretching back thousands of years. Among the more familiar images of animals and human figures, your attention is irresistibly drawn to the Barrier Canyon-style pictographs, particularly the tall, imposing figures with hollow or missing eyes, often adorned with strange, almost technological-looking appendages. You reach out, tracing the outline of one of these enigmatic figures, feeling the rough texture of the sandstone. These anthropomorphic forms, some over 8 feet tall, are characterized by their broad shoulders, tapering bodies, and most strikingly, their lack of discernible facial features: no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Sometimes, dark, hollow ovals suggest eyes, giving them an unsettling, otherworldly gaze. They often appear to float or hover, occasionally with lines emanating from their heads or bodies, as if connected to something unseen. Dating to around 4000 to 1000 BC, these are among the oldest and most mysterious images in North America. Mainstream archaeology interprets these Barrier Canyon-style figures as powerful shamanic beings, representations of deities, spirits, or ancestral figures. The exaggerated forms, lack of facial features, and seemingly floating postures are considered symbolic, reflecting the spiritual experiences of the artists, perhaps visions induced by ritual or trance. They are seen as integral to the indigenous belief systems, depicting mythological entities or figures associated with the cosmos and the spirit world, not literal beings. However, alternative researchers propose that the unnerving similarities to modern descriptions of extraterrestrial beings or figures in helmets and gear suggest a more literal interpretation. They point to the consistent anatomical unusualness: the round, empty eyes, the smooth, featureless faces, and the sometimes bulky, non-humanoid bodies. The lines emanating from them are sometimes likened to energy fields or communication devices. The striking similarity across continents, where similar, big-eyed, or helmeted figures appear in other ancient rock art or artifacts, suggests a recurring motif that transcends independent artistic development. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the consistent, anatomically unusual features that distinguish these beings so clearly from human forms in ancient art. What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of these eyeless figures? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? The last vestiges of sunset fade over the rust-colored cliffs of Sego Canyon, and a quiet stillness descends, broken only by the distant call of a night bird. You find yourself not just observing the ancient pictographs, but listening to the echoes of the human stories that accompany them. Your mind turns to the oral traditions of the Ute people, whose ancestors lived in this very landscape and whose narratives often speak of the strange, unearthly figures etched into the rock. You delve into ethnographic records, reading accounts of Ute traditions that sometimes describe the eyeless faces as Nunama, or star beings, figures who came from the sky, possessing great power and imparting knowledge. These narratives often speak of beings who were not quite human, distinct in their appearance and abilities, influencing the early inhabitants of the region. The stories are rich with cosmological detail, describing interactions with beings from other realms or celestial origins, not as abstract deities, but as tangible visitors. Mainstream ethnography interprets these indigenous oral traditions as complex mythological narratives, profound spiritual allegories, or symbolic representations of human connection to the cosmos and the spirit world. From this perspective, the star beings are personifications of natural forces, dreams, or shamanic visions, reflecting deep cultural beliefs rather than literal encounters. The stories serve to explain creation, provide moral guidance, or describe important rites of passage, evolving over millennia through storytelling and cultural exchange. However, alternative researchers propose that the enduring precision and consistency of these narratives, particularly when describing beings that physically resemble the rock art, suggest more than mere myth. They argue that the detailed accounts of non-human entities arriving from the sky, sometimes associated with imparting knowledge or technology, could be literal recollections of ancient visitations. The striking similarity across continents, where sky god narratives and accounts of teachers from the stars are prevalent, suggests a shared memory of a profound global experience. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the persistent and specific descriptions of anatomically unusual humanoid figures in both the ancient art and the accompanying oral traditions. How did ancient peoples know astronomical facts only confirmed by modern science, and how did they interpret the beings they depicted? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The heavy, humid air of the crypt beneath the Hathor temple at Dendera in Egypt is still and cool, a stark contrast to the blazing desert sun outside. You descend into the semi-darkness, your footsteps echoing softly on the ancient stone, drawn towards the famous reliefs adorning a hidden chamber. Your eyes adjust, and there, on the wall, you see it, a series of carvings that, to the modern eye, bear an uncanny resemblance to giant light bulbs or Crookes tubes. You run your hand along the smooth, cool stone, feeling the precise lines of the carving. The relief depicts figures holding large, elongated, bulb-like objects. Inside these bulbs, a snake is often depicted, extending from a lotus flower, reaching towards a deity. A thick cable or cord runs from the base of the bulb to a small box or generator-like device, from which a series of horizontal lines extend, as if illustrating some form of electrical connection or power source. These carvings date to the Ptolemaic period, around 300 BC, but depict themes and knowledge that stretch back millennia. Mainstream Egyptology interprets these Dendera light bulbs as highly symbolic religious iconography, deeply rooted in Egyptian mythology. The bulb is understood to represent the D-jade pillar, a symbol of stability, and the snake inside is often identified as the god Harsamtis, representing fertility and creation. The lotus flower signifies rebirth, and the cable is interpreted as the stem of the lotus, or a stylized depiction of the passage of divine energy. This perspective firmly places the images within the context of their spiritual beliefs, as representations of cosmic creation or the life-giving power of the gods, not as literal technological objects. However, alternative researchers propose that the striking visual similarity to electrical devices, particularly early incandescent lamps or plasma tubes, suggests a more literal interpretation. They argue that the detailed depiction of a contained light source, a filament-like snake, and a clear connection to what appears to be a power source, is too specific to be dismissed as purely metaphorical. They suggest this relief could be a depiction of an ancient technology, perhaps inherited from a lost civilization or introduced by extraterrestrial visitors, allowing illumination in otherwise dark underground chambers without the sooty residue of torches. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise depiction of technological objects predating their known invention by thousands of years. Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The cool, heavy air of the Dendera crypt still surrounds you, a subterranean quiet unbroken by the desert winds outside. Your gaze returns to the intricate reliefs, not just the bulb-like objects, but the subtle details that accompany them. You closely examine the thick, wavy line extending from the base of the bulb to a small, rectangular pedestal or box-like structure. From this box, other lines appear to radiate outwards, creating an impression of connection and purpose. The absence of soot on the crypt walls, which would be expected from centuries of torch use, adds another layer to the enigma of how these chambers were illuminated for artists to work in such detail. Mainstream Egyptology interprets the cable and box elements as integral parts of the religious symbolism. The thick, wavy line is often seen as the stem of the lotus flower from which the snake emerges, or a stylized representation of the current of divine energy flowing from the deities to the sacred symbol. The box, or pedestal at the base, is considered a depiction of a magical or ritualistic stand, a receptacle for divine power, or a symbolic ground for the creative forces depicted. This perspective emphasizes that ancient Egyptians illuminated their temples and tombs with oil lamps, mirrors, and torches, and no archaeological evidence of electrical power generation has ever been found in their civilization. However, alternative researchers propose that these detailed depictions are more than mere symbolism. They argue that the clear, consistent imagery of a thick cable connecting a light source to a power unit strongly suggests an understanding of electricity, or at least observation of devices utilizing such principles. The absence of torch soot in many intricate, deep chambers is often cited as a piece of circumstantial evidence supporting a different lighting method. They suggest these reliefs document an actual technology, perhaps from a forgotten advanced civilization or imparted by extraterrestrial visitors, allowing ancient Egyptians to light their darkest spaces. The concept of advanced technological objects in primitive contexts is further echoed, for instance, by the controversial Baghdad battery, a 2,000-year-old artifact that some interpret as an ancient galvanic cell. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and consistent depiction of elements that so closely resemble technological components, predating their known invention by thousands of years. What did ancient artists truly witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of what appears to be a power system? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with a lost technology? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The crisp alpine air of Valcamonica, a valley nestled in the Italian Alps, carries the scent of pine and damp earth as you walk among ancient boulders. Here, etched into the dark, glacial rock faces, are over 300,000 petroglyphs, a vast open-air museum dating from the Upper Paleolithic to medieval times. Your attention is drawn to a particular series of carvings, often grouped as astronauts or helmeted beings, which stand in stark contrast to the more common depictions of hunters, animals, and agricultural scenes. You trace the weathered lines of these figures, feeling the ancient coldness of the stone. They are characterized by large, often circular or oval heads, sometimes featuring what appear to be antennae or peculiar headgear. Their bodies are depicted in strange postures, sometimes with lines emanating from them, or holding objects that resemble modern tools or weapons. The most striking element is the clear, helmet effect, a separation of the head from the body by a defined neck ring or visor-like shape, creating an impression of sealed protective gear. These figures date to various periods, with some of the most enigmatic dating back 7,000 to 10,000 years. Mainstream archaeology interprets these helmeted beings as highly stylized human figures, perhaps shamans wearing elaborate ceremonial masks, or warriors adorned with ornate head dresses and protective gear common to their culture. The antennae are often explained as feathers, animal horns, or other ritualistic adornments. The figures' unusual stances or objects are seen as symbolic representations of religious rituals, warfare, or mythological narratives. This perspective views them as imaginative artistic expressions rooted in the local cultural context and spiritual beliefs. However, alternative researchers propose that the consistent depiction of seemingly helmeted figures, clearly distinguished from ordinary humans, across various ancient cultures suggests a more literal interpretation. They argue that the remarkable resemblance to modern astronauts, complete with enclosed headgear and unusual equipment, is too specific to be dismissed as mere artistic convention or coincidence. The striking similarity across continents, where beings in spacesuits appear in places like Tassili or in Sumerian depictions of the Anunnaki, suggests a shared inspiration that challenges conventional timelines of human development. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and consistent depiction of figures wearing what appear to be technologically advanced protective suits, predating their known invention. What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of these helmeted figures? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? The ancient light of the Italian Alps bathes the expansive rock art park of Valcamonica, revealing layers upon layers of human expression etched into stone over millennia. You walk along a path worn smooth by countless footsteps, surrounded by tens of thousands of petroglyphs that tell a sweeping story of human life, from the earliest hunter-gatherers to the Iron Age. Amidst this vast historical record of daily life, rituals, and warfare, your eye is continually drawn back to the same unusual figures. The helmeted beings, distinct and enigmatic, reappearing across different epochs of this immense outdoor gallery. You spend time cataloging these figures, noticing their persistent characteristics. Despite the stylistic changes that naturally occur over thousands of years in other depictions, these particular entities maintain a similar form. The prominent, rounded headgear, the often featureless faces within, and bodies that sometimes appear bulky or adorned with unfamiliar devices. Some are static, others seem to hover, and a few are shown interacting with objects or symbols not easily identified. They are not merely isolated anomalies, but a recurring motif within the Camunian artistic tradition, distinguishing themselves from the naturalistic animals and recognizable human forms carved beside them. Mainstream archaeology interprets this prevalence as part of the rich tapestry of human symbolism and artistic evolution. It suggests that these figures could represent evolving concepts of powerful deities, protectors, or ancestors whose imagery changed over time but maintained certain stylized elements. The persistence of helmeted appearances might reflect enduring spiritual beliefs about figures connected to the sky or the underworld, expressed through varying artistic conventions of different eras within the valley's long history. The fact that these are found among thousands of other, more conventional carvings supports their integration into local cultural and religious narratives. However, alternative researchers propose that the consistent, distinct, and anatomically unusual nature of these figures, when compared to other human forms in the same art, signifies more than just evolving artistic license. They argue that the repeated depiction of beings clearly distinguished from humans, with features that resonate with modern interpretations of protective gear or even non-terrestrial visitors, implies a shared source of inspiration. The striking similarity across continents, where similar helmeted or large-headed figures appear in rock art from other ancient cultures, suggests a recurring encounter or a globally shared, forgotten knowledge that conventional explanations struggle to account for. Why do these distinct, non-humanoid forms persist over such a long span of human history in Valcamonica, almost as if documenting a specific type of entity? Are these depictions purely symbolic, or do they hint at a deeper, more literal narrative encoded in stone? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The hushed atmosphere of a museum gallery in Bogotá, Colombia, surrounds you. The scent of polished wood and aged artifacts hangs lightly in the air. You stand before a display case, gazing at a small, golden artifact, approximately 2 inches long, created by the ancient Quimbaya civilization of Colombia, dating from around 600 to 1000 AD. Its form is exquisite, crafted with remarkable metallurgical skill, but it is its shape that truly captures your attention, a striking resemblance to a modern aircraft. You lean closer, observing the details of the gold, plane, or bird artifact. It possesses a triangular delta wing, a vertical stabilizer, and what appears to be a tail rudder. The body is streamlined, tapering towards a distinct nose. There's no recognizable bird head or feathers, unlike other zoomorphic artifacts from the same culture. Instead, the design elements seem to prioritize aerodynamics, flat, rigid wings, a clear fuselage, and a stabilized tail. This object is not an isolated piece. Similar, golden airplanes, have been found from other ancient South American cultures. Mainstream archaeology interprets these Quimby artifacts as highly stylized depictions of local fauna, particularly birds, insects, or fish. The delta wing shape is explained as abstract representations of wings or fins, common in indigenous art. The smooth body is seen as a simplified artistic convention, and the vertical tail element as a dorsal fin or another stylized bird feature. This perspective emphasizes that ancient cultures often created hybrid creatures or abstract forms with symbolic, ceremonial, or religious meaning, and any resemblance to modern aircraft is purely coincidental, a product of pareidolia, our tendency to see familiar patterns in random stimuli. However, alternative researchers propose that the precise aerodynamic features of these artifacts, which have been noted by aeronautical engineers, suggest a knowledge of flight that predates known human aviation by millennia. They argue that if these were merely stylized animals, one would expect to see more organic, naturalistic forms, such as feathers or distinct animal heads. Instead, the rigid wings, vertical stabilizers, and fuselage-like bodies are features of actual flying machines. The striking similarity to modern aircraft designs, and the fact that functional models built from these artifacts can actually fly, suggests a lost knowledge or direct observation of advanced technology. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise aerodynamic design found in artifacts predating the invention of flight. How did ancient peoples create models that perfectly replicate the principles of flight without ever seeing an airplane? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with advanced flying craft? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The cool, controlled climate of the museum gallery now allows for a meticulous examination of the Quimby artifacts. You observe not just one, but several of these small, golden objects, each sharing a remarkably consistent design. Rigid, often triangular wings, a sleek, tapering body, and a distinct vertical stabilizer at the rear. The precision in their crafting, though small, speaks to a sophisticated understanding of form and material by the ancient Quimby civilization. You recall the details of modern investigations into these artifacts. Aeronautical engineers, intrigued by their shapes, have created enlarged replicas, often from lightweight materials. When these models were subjected to wind tunnel tests or launched as gliders, they demonstrated stable flight characteristics. The wings generate lift, the tail provides stability, and the overall form is inherently aerodynamic, performing efficiently in air. This empirical evidence suggests that, regardless of intent, the original Quimby artists captured principles of flight in their work, dating back over 1,000 years ago. Mainstream archaeology interprets this observed aerodynamic capability as a fascinating but ultimately coincidental outcome of stylized animal representation. The argument is that many birds and insects possess natural aerodynamic forms, and when ancient artists simplified or abstracted these forms, they might inadvertently create shapes that happen to be aerodynamically sound. The tests with flying models are seen as a modern imposition of our technological understanding onto ancient art, where the primary purpose was symbolic, religious, or decorative, not functional aeronautical design. However, alternative researchers propose that the consistent and functional aerodynamic properties, verified by modern testing, cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. They argue that for multiple artifacts, across different South American cultures, to independently arrive at such precise and functional aerodynamic designs without any understanding of flight or observation of flying machines strains conventional explanation. They suggest these objects could be miniature models of actual flying craft witnessed by ancient peoples, perhaps the Vimanas, described in ancient Indian texts, or other flying objects from a lost advanced civilization or extraterrestrial visitors. The presence of technological objects in contexts predating their invention emphasizes the mystery. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the demonstrable aerodynamic capabilities of these ancient artifacts. How did ancient peoples create models that, when replicated, actually fly, without possessing any known concept of aviation? Are these depictions merely artistic representations of birds, or do they hold a deeper, more literal secret about ancient encounters with airborne technology? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? Deep within the Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque, Mexico, the air is cool and heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. You descend into the burial chamber of Janab, Pakal, the great Maya ruler, where his massive sarcophagus lies. Your gaze immediately falls upon its intricately carved lid, a masterpiece of Maya art from the 7th century AD, which depicts a scene of profound cosmological significance. You lean closer, running your hand over the cool, smooth limestone. The central figure, Pakal, is shown in a reclined posture, seemingly descending into the underworld or ascending to the heavens. He is surrounded by a complex array of symbols, a cosmic tree, celestial birds, and glyphs. However, it is the detail of Pakal's position and the apparatus around him that captures immediate attention. He appears to be seated in a contoured chair, with his hands on controls, his feet on pedals, and what looks like an intricate breathing device or mask over his mouth and nose. Flames or exhaust seem to emanate from the bottom of his craft, which is surrounded by structural elements that suggest a sophisticated machine rather than purely organic forms. Mainstream archaeology interprets this relief as a classic depiction of Pakal's journey into the underworld, or Xibalba, at the moment of his death. The cosmic tree is central to Maya belief, connecting the underworld, earth, and heavens. Pakal's posture is explained as representing the moment of rebirth from the jaws of a mythical monster, or a shamanic journey. The controls and breathing device are seen as symbolic representations of Maya regalia and ritualistic objects, integral to his divine status and transition. The flames are stylized representations of the roots of the cosmic tree or the breath of the underworld monster. However, alternative researchers propose that the intricate details of the carving bear an uncanny resemblance to a human figure operating a piece of advanced technology, specifically a spacecraft. They argue that the ergonomic seating, the clear hand and foot controls, the apparent breathing apparatus, and the exhaust at the bottom of the vessel are too specific and technologically suggestive to be dismissed as mere symbolism. The striking similarity across continents, where flying craft and technologically equipped beings are depicted in various ancient cultures, suggests a shared inspiration for such imagery. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise technological elements depicted in this ancient carving, predating the invention of human spaceflight by over a millennium. Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with advanced technology? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The silence of Pakal's tomb at Palenque is profound, a palpable weight of history and mystery. You stand before the sarcophagus lid once more, taking in the full sweep of the carving, not just the central figure, but the rich context of Maya cosmology surrounding it. The intricate details of the world tree, or tree of life, stretch above and below Pakal, its branches reaching into the heavens, its roots plunging into the underworld. Atop the tree perches the celestial bird, and at its base, the jaws of the underworld monster are visible. Mainstream iconography interprets this entire tableau as a deeply symbolic narrative of death, rebirth, and the Maya cyclical view of time. Pakal's posture, bending backwards, is seen as representing his descent into the underworld at the moment of his passing, or his emergence from it in rebirth. The cosmic tree serves as the axis mundi, the central pillar connecting all realms of existence. The flames, or exhaust, are explained as the roots of the cosmic tree, which transform into serpentine forms, or the visible breath of the underworld entity. All elements, including Pakal's apparatus, are integrated into a complex metaphorical journey of a divine king, reflecting sophisticated religious iconography. However, alternative researchers propose that while the Maya undoubtedly possessed a rich symbolic language, the highly detailed and specific elements of Pakal's craft defy simple metaphorical interpretation. They argue that if it were purely symbolic of a cosmic tree journey, why the inclusion of such ergonomically precise controls, pedals, and a breathing device that so strongly resemble functional technology? The tree of life itself, with its segmented trunk and flowing elements, has been interpreted by some as a rocket's exhaust plume, providing a contextual launchpad for Pachel's vehicle. This alternative perspective draws parallels with worldwide flood myths and sky god narratives, suggesting a common thread of ancient encounters with beings who arrived from the heavens. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise technological features alongside the undeniable spiritual symbolism. Could the Maya have been depicting both? Is it possible that their rich cosmology was influenced by literal events, translated into symbols that still resonate with us today? What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery? Are these depictions metaphorical or literal documentation of contact, and what truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The rolling green hills of Oxfordshire, England, stretch out before you, the wind carrying the faint scent of damp grass and distant wildflowers. You stand on the slopes of Uffington Hill, gazing at the iconic Uffington White Horse, a prehistoric hill figure over 3,000 years old. Etched into the chalk hillside, this colossal abstract form is best viewed from a distance, or even from the air, its sweeping lines and distinct shape revealing themselves as you gain elevation. You observe the construction of this enormous geoglyph. Deep trenches cut into the turf, revealing the gleaming white chalk beneath. The horse, nearly 360 feet long, is rendered in highly stylized, almost minimalist lines, forming an abstract representation of a galloping horse. Its elongated body, disconnected legs, and bird-like beak for a head are unlike any natural horse, suggesting a powerful symbolic meaning. Dating back to the Bronze Age, this is one of Britain's most enigmatic and ancient landmarks. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Uffington White Horse as a powerful tribal emblem or a sacred effigy, likely representing a local deity or a horse goddess associated with the land and the sun. The highly stylized form is seen as characteristic of late Bronze Age art, reflecting specific cultural and religious beliefs of the Uffington people. The need for viewing from a distance is explained by its symbolic purpose. It was a landmark, a sacred space, or a territorial marker meant to be seen and appreciated by communities from afar, or perhaps by their gods in the sky. It is believed to be a testament to local craftsmanship and spiritual devotion. However, alternative researchers propose that the abstract, almost mechanical-looking form, and its inherent need for aerial viewing, suggest a deeper mystery. They argue that if it was simply a horse, even a stylized one, why such a departure from typical animalistic depiction, with its stark, almost alien features? The fact that it is best appreciated from hundreds of feet above, much like the Nazca lines in Peru, raises questions about the intended audience or the observational capabilities of its creators. The striking similarity across continents, where monumental earthworks and geoglyphs are designed for aerial viewing, suggests a recurring theme that conventional explanations struggle to account for. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precision and abstractness of a figure designed primarily for aerial viewing, thousands of years before human flight. Why do disconnected ancient cultures depict such monumental, abstract symbols that only make sense from the sky? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with beings from above? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The ancient ground of Dragon Hill, just adjacent to the Uffington White Horse, feels cool beneath your feet as twilight descends upon the English landscape. From this vantage point, you gaze down upon the enormous chalk figure, its abstract form now softened by the fading light, presenting a striking contrast against the dark green hills. The scale is truly impressive, revealing the full sweep of its minimalist design that was barely comprehensible from the valley floor. You observe the precise placement of the white horse within the landscape, its orientation seemingly intentional. While the exact astronomical alignments are debated, researchers have explored connections between the horse and various celestial events or stellar positions. The single eye of the horse, a circular feature within its abstract head, draws your focus, appearing almost like a singular point of observation or alignment. Its creation, an enduring monument dating back to the Bronze Age, speaks volumes about the collective effort and perhaps the shared vision of its ancient builders. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Uffington White Horse and its placement as intrinsically linked to the spiritual and practical needs of the Bronze Age communities. It is seen as a territorial marker, a symbol of tribal identity, or a sacred effigy associated with sun worship or a horse deity, integral to their religious iconography. Any potential astronomical alignments are considered part of a broader archaeo-astronomical understanding, where sacred sites were often aligned with significant solar or lunar events, reflecting a deep connection to the agricultural cycle and cosmic order, not impossible astronomical knowledge. This perspective views the celestial connection as a natural extension of ancient human observation. However, alternative researchers propose that the deliberate design for aerial viewing, combined with subtle celestial indicators, hints at a knowledge or purpose beyond simple earthbound spiritualism. They argue that if the eye or other features align with specific constellations or unusual celestial phenomena, it could suggest a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos, perhaps beyond what was thought possible without advanced instruments. The striking similarity across continents, where sky-oriented geoglyphs like the Nazca lines appear, suggests a universal message or a shared awareness of a watchful sky, possibly even for advanced entities visiting from above. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise alignment and monumental scale of a figure designed for an aerial perspective, yet created by a people without flight. What deep understanding of the cosmos did these ancient people possess that led them to etch such a profound image into the earth, seemingly for the heavens to behold? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The gentle sway of the ocean currents surrounds you, a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow filtering through the turquoise waters off the coast of Yonaguni Island, Japan. You descend deeper, the pressure of the water a soft embrace, until a colossal, geometric structure emerges from the blue depths. Before you lies the Yonaguni Monument, an astonishing submerged formation of enormous sandstone blocks, featuring stark straight edges, right angles, and flat terraces that stretch for hundreds of feet. You approach the main pyramid-like structure, observing its imposing scale, approximately 500 feet long, 130 feet wide, and 90 feet high. You trace the distinct, almost perfectly perpendicular lines of its terraces and rises, feeling the rough, ancient texture of the stone. There are clear step-like formations, precise 90-degree corners, and even triangular depressions, which some identify as carved steps or roads. This enigmatic monument, discovered in 1986, rests at depths ranging from 60 to 100 feet. Mainstream geology interprets this monument as a remarkable example of natural geological phenomena. It suggests that the formation is a product of tectonic activity, natural fracturing, and erosion over millennia, acting on highly uniform sandstone layers. The straight lines and right angles are attributed to natural jointing planes within the rock, which, when subjected to wave action and seismic forces, can create impressively regular and stepped features. From this perspective, any perceived architectural elements are merely pareidolia, our minds imposing human design onto natural formations. However, alternative researchers propose that the sheer regularity, multiple distinct features, and the symmetrical nature of the Yonaguni monument are too pronounced and consistent to be solely a natural occurrence. They argue that the presence of features like clearly defined steps, drainage channels, and what appear to be carved symbols or structures, strongly suggests deliberate human modification or construction. They suggest it's a remnant of a lost civilization, submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, possibly around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, placing it within the time frame of other unexplained ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the striking geometric precision and complex features across such a vast underwater formation. Are these distinct features purely coincidental geological formations, or do they represent the forgotten work of an ancient, advanced civilization lost to the rising seas? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The soft current tugs gently at your dive gear as you hover above the colossal Yonaguni monument, sunlight dappling through the clear turquoise water. The air exhaled from your regulator rises in shimmering bubbles, accentuating the profound silence of this underwater realm. You reach out, your fingers brushing against the rough, millennia-old surface of a massive sandstone block. The sheer scale and geometric precision of the structure are even more striking when you can intimately trace its contours. You push off, swimming slowly along one of the monument's many platforms. What captures your focus are the undeniably straight lines and sharp, almost perfect 90-degree angles that define its terraced structure. You pass what appear to be carved steps leading up to flat, expansive surfaces, and then descend along a vertical face that seems to have been meticulously cut. Further along, there are distinct triangular indentations, and even what some divers identify as channels or roads, all exhibiting a degree of regularity that feels deeply unnatural in this submarine environment. This enormous formation, approximately 90 feet tall and 500 feet long, sits submerged, its highest points around 100 feet below the surface. Mainstream geology interprets these features as purely natural formations. It suggests that the monument is composed of highly erodible sandstone, which, when subjected to intense seismic activity, ocean currents, and natural weathering along existing fault lines and bedding planes, can fracture and erode in remarkably rectilinear ways. The steps and terraces are seen as sequential fracturing along these natural weaknesses, while the straight channels are explained as natural erosion patterns. This perspective attributes the perceived artificiality to pareidolia, where the human eye imposes familiar patterns onto natural phenomena. However, alternative researchers propose that the sheer consistency of the geometric features, including multiple parallel lines, perfect right angles, and symmetrical arrangements, are far too numerous and precise to be explained solely by natural processes. They argue that while some natural formations can exhibit straight lines, the combination of so many distinct, artificial-looking features in one cohesive structure strongly suggests deliberate carving or modification by human hands. They point to the monument's location, which would have been above sea level during the last ice age, possibly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, aligning with widespread flood myths and accounts of submerged cities. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the striking geometric precision and complex features across such a vast underwater formation. Are these distinct features purely coincidental geological formations, or do they represent the forgotten work of an ancient, advanced civilization lost to the rising seas? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The hushed air of the Archaeological Museum in India feels cool against your skin as you stand before a small, unassuming stone artifact. This is the Lolodov plate, a disc of unknown origin, but often associated with ancient Sumerian or Babylonian artifacts due to its stylistic resemblances. Its exact dating and provenance are debated, yet the imagery carved upon its surface sparks immediate curiosity, depicting what appears to be a map of our own solar system and something far grander. You lean in, examining the intricate details etched into the hard stone. At its center, a swirling, disc-like image dominates, reminiscent of a spiral galaxy, with distinct arms extending outwards. Around this central motif, several smaller spheres or planets orbit, some with concentric rings, others with clear identifying markers. What makes this plate particularly compelling is a depiction that some interpret as a cometary body or an unknown celestial object intruding into this solar map, along with what appear to be humanoid figures. Mainstream archaeology, where it acknowledges such artifacts, often interprets them as stylized celestial maps representing ancient cosmological beliefs or religious iconography. The central galaxy would be seen as a generalized representation of the cosmos, a sun, or a divine vortex. The orbiting spheres are interpreted as familiar planets or stars visible to the naked eye, and the humanoid figures as deities or priests associated with the heavens. The cometary body might be a symbolic representation of a star or a mythical celestial event, all within the framework of ancient astronomical observation and myth-making. However, alternative researchers propose that the striking visual accuracy of the central galaxy, particularly its spiral arms, suggests a level of astronomical knowledge impossible without telescopes. They argue that the detailed depiction of planetary bodies, potentially even beyond our current understanding of the solar system, challenges the conventional timeline of ancient scientific capabilities. The presence of specific, clearly distinguished humanoid figures, sometimes depicted as observing or interacting with these celestial bodies, suggests a more literal record of visitors or advanced observers. The striking similarity across continents, where celestial maps showing impossible astronomical knowledge appear in ancient temples, suggests a shared understanding or source. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precision of these depictions, particularly the galactic form, predating the invention of telescopes by thousands of years. How did ancient peoples know astronomical facts only confirmed by modern science? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The archaeological museum remains quiet around you, a sanctuary for whispers from the past. You return to the Lolodov plate, feeling the cool, unyielding surface of the stone beneath your fingertips. This isn't a soft, easily sculpted material. It's a dense, hard disc, challenging to work even with modern tools, let alone the implements available to ancient civilizations. Your focus now shifts from the imagery itself to the sheer craftsmanship required to etch such fine, intricate details into this formidable material. You closely examine the delicate lines forming the spiral arms of the central galaxy, the perfectly round orbits, and the distinct features of the planetary bodies. The precision of these carvings, though small, speaks of tools capable of executing incredibly fine work on hard stone, without breakage or crude marks. The plate's exact material and age are still debated, but its presumed ancient origins raise fundamental questions about ancient technology and metallurgical capabilities. Mainstream archaeology interprets such intricate carvings on hard stone as a testament to the extraordinary skill and patience of ancient artisans. It suggests that with persistent effort, using harder stones like obsidian, or possibly early bronze or copper tools combined with abrasive sands and water, ancient craftsmen could achieve remarkable detail. The long timelines of these civilizations allowed for generations of accumulated skill and painstaking labor. This perspective views the creation of the Lolodov plate as a pinnacle of ancient craftsmanship, a product of human ingenuity pushed to its limits with rudimentary means. However, alternative researchers propose that the microscopic precision required for some of the details, and the hardness of the stone, challenge the narrative of simple hand tools. They argue that to achieve such uniform lines and perfect circles, particularly for something like a galactic spiral, implies either advanced cutting tools, perhaps with diamond or corundum tips, or even methods involving sonic vibrations or unknown chemical processes. The striking precision on this impossible stone, combined with the impossible astronomical knowledge it depicts, suggests a technology or understanding far beyond what we typically attribute to ancient civilizations. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the consistent, intricate detail on hard stone, when the known tools of the era were seemingly inadequate. How did ancient artisans achieve such advanced levels of precision, carving complex astronomical maps, without the advanced technology we presume is necessary? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology, and what forgotten tools might they have wielded? The air within the cool, damp embrace of a rock shelter in the remote Kimberley region of Western Australia feels ancient, carrying the earthy scent of rock and ochre. You stand before a mesmerizing panel of Aboriginal rock art, a vibrant testament to millennia of human creativity. Your gaze is drawn to the striking figures of the Wandjina, powerful beings central to the mythology of the Moanjum Aboriginal people, depicted on these cave walls for thousands of years, with some dating back as far as 4,000 years. You trace the painted outline of a Wandjina figure, feeling the smooth, cool rock. These colossal figures, often several meters high, are characterized by large, often white, head-like forms framed by a halo or radiating lines, and large, dark, often featureless eyes. Most strikingly, the Wandjina figures consistently lack mouths. Their bodies are typically depicted without detailed limbs or clothing, often appearing as ethereal, floating presences. They are almost always frontal, dominating the rock face. Mainstream archaeology and anthropology interpret the Wandjina as profound representations of ancestral spirits, rain spirits, or creation beings within Aboriginal cosmology. The halo around their heads is seen as representing clouds or lightning, signifying their power over storms and rain, crucial for the desert landscape. The absence of a mouth is often explained symbolically. As spirits, they do not need to speak, or if they did, the ensuing floods would be catastrophic. Their large, unblinking eyes are thought to represent their omniscient gaze and spiritual power. This perspective emphasizes their role as deities or powerful ancestors, creators, and lawgivers. However, alternative researchers propose that the unique, consistent anatomical features of the Wandjina, particularly the large, dark, mouthless heads and halo-like adornments, bear a compelling resemblance to popular depictions of extraterrestrial beings or figures in specialized headgear. They argue that the remarkable uniformity of these figures across vast stretches of the Kimberley region, despite changes in artistic style over millennia, suggests a shared source of inspiration. The striking similarity across continents, where similar, big-eyed, or mouthless, figures appear in other ancient rock art, suggests a recurring motif that transcends independent artistic development. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the precise and consistent depiction of anatomically unusual humanoid figures in ancient art. What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of these mouthless, large-eyed beings? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with non-human entities? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The dry, earthy scent of the Kimberley caves now carries with it the echo of ancient voices, as you turn your attention from the painted Wandjina figures to the rich oral traditions of the Moanjum Aboriginal people, the custodians of this sacred art. The knowledge passed down through generations provides a deeper layer of understanding, offering context to the enigmatic figures etched into the rock faces. You listen to accounts describing the Wandjina as cloud spirits, or rain makers, who descended from the sky during the Dreamtime, the creation period. They are revered as powerful creator beings who shaped the landscape, created humanity, and laid down the laws and cultural practices still observed today. The stories vividly describe their arrival, their actions on Earth, and their eventual return to the sky, or their transformation into rock art, where their power continues to reside. The consistent depiction of their mouthless faces is often explained within these traditions as a sign of their divine status. They do not speak for themselves, but rather communicate through thunder and lightning, or through chosen spiritual intermediaries. Mainstream anthropology interprets these intricate oral traditions as complex mythological narratives, profound spiritual allegories that explain creation, natural phenomena, and social order. From this perspective, the cloud spirits are personifications of the natural forces of the Australian monsoon climate, deeply integrated into the spiritual fabric of Aboriginal life. The narratives serve to transmit cultural knowledge, reinforce social structures, and connect successive generations to their ancestral land and its spiritual essence, rather than literal historical events. However, alternative researchers propose that the enduring precision and consistency of these narratives, particularly when describing beings that physically resemble the rock art and arrive from the sky, suggest more than mere myth. They argue that the detailed accounts of non-human entities descending to Earth, influencing early human societies, and possessing powers beyond human comprehension, could be literal recollections of ancient visitations. The striking similarity across continents, where sky god narratives and accounts of teachers from the stars are prevalent, suggests a shared memory of profound ancient interactions, woven into the cultural fabric. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the persistent and specific descriptions of anatomically unusual humanoid figures in both the ancient art and the accompanying oral traditions, always associated with the heavens. What did the ancient Moanjum people truly witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery and narratives of these powerful beings from the sky? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact, and what truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The hushed, climate-controlled environment of a rare book library now envelops you, the scent of aged paper and scholarly research filling the air. You sit before a carefully preserved facsimile of the Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, dating from the post-classic period, 11th–12th centuries AD. This ancient manuscript, made of bark paper, is a treasure trove of Maya knowledge, filled with intricate glyphs and precise astronomical tables. You gently turn the pages, marveling at the detailed astronomical calculations. The codex contains incredibly accurate predictions for solar and lunar eclipses, tables tracking the movements of Venus, and sophisticated calendrical systems. What is truly astonishing, however, are some of the celestial maps and calculations that suggest a detailed understanding of planetary mechanics and stellar positions that seem to defy observation with the naked eye. The precision of the Maya calendar, a complex system interwoven with their astronomical observations, is a testament to their intellectual prowess. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Dresden Codex as a pinnacle of indigenous Maya scientific and religious achievement. It suggests that the Maya developed their advanced astronomical knowledge through centuries of meticulous naked-eye observation, combined with sophisticated mathematical systems. The complex tables and calendars are seen as a product of their deep cultural dedication to understanding the cosmos for agricultural planning, religious rituals, and dynastic legitimization. Any seemingly impossible astronomical knowledge is explained as a result of extended observation periods, rather than advanced instrumentation or external input. However, alternative researchers propose that certain calculations and celestial maps within the Dresden Codex imply a level of astronomical knowledge impossible to achieve without advanced optical instruments like telescopes. They argue that some of the specific planetary alignments and stellar observations described, or precisely predicted, suggest a capability beyond what a pre-telescopic civilization should possess. The striking similarity across continents, where celestial maps showing impossible astronomical knowledge appear in ancient temples or artifacts like the Lolodov plate, suggests a shared, forgotten source of information or direct contact with beings possessing superior scientific understanding. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and seemingly impossible astronomical knowledge depicted in ancient texts, predating modern science by thousands of years. How did ancient peoples know astronomical facts only confirmed by modern telescopes? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with extraterrestrial knowledge? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The soft rustle of ancient manuscript pages fills the quiet library as you return to the Dresden Codex, your gaze now scrutinizing not just the tables, but the intricate glyphs accompanying the astronomical data. These aren't simple pictures. They're a complex system of Maya writing, carefully depicting celestial bodies, deities, and calendrical periods. Your mind grapples with the sheer density of information encoded within these symbols, particularly those describing phenomena only observable with advanced instruments. You study pages dedicated to the cycles of Venus, a planetary body whose movements the Maya tracked with astounding accuracy. However, some sections seem to describe more than just Venus's visible phases or its heliacal rise and set. Linguists and astronomers studying the Codex note passages that, when translated, hint at an understanding of the planet's orbital eccentricity or even its synodic period with a precision that appears difficult to achieve solely through naked eye observation. Furthermore, some glyphs are interpreted as representing constellations, comets, or other celestial events with details that challenge the assumed limitations of ancient astronomy. Mainstream Mayanist interpretations attribute these intricate descriptions to the cumulative knowledge of generations of Maya astronomers. They argue that the Maya's deep spiritual and practical connection to the cosmos drove them to an unparalleled dedication to observational astronomy, allowing them to record subtle celestial patterns over vast periods. The impossible details are explained as extrapolations from long-term data, combined with a sophisticated mathematical system that allowed for precise predictions, even if the underlying physical principles weren't fully understood in a modern scientific sense. However, alternative researchers propose that the sheer scientific accuracy of certain descriptions, particularly regarding invisible or extremely subtle astronomical phenomena, suggests a knowledge base beyond empirical observation. They argue that the linguistic terms and visual representations used by the Maya for these celestial bodies are too specific to be a lucky guess or a purely theoretical construct. The striking similarity across continents, where ancient cultures demonstrate impossible astronomical knowledge, suggests a shared, forgotten source or direct transfer of information from an advanced civilization or extraterrestrial visitors. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise astronomical knowledge embedded in glyphs, predating the invention of telescopes and modern astrophysics. How did ancient peoples possess such detailed knowledge of planetary mechanics and stellar positions? Are these descriptions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with advanced cosmic understanding? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The dry, ancient scent of clay and history fills the museum air as you stand before a display of Sumerian cylinder seals. These small, intricate artifacts from ancient Mesopotamia, dating back as far as 4,500 to 5,000 years, were used to roll impressions onto wet clay. One particular seal, known as the VA243 cylinder seal, draws your complete attention. Though tiny, its etched images contain a universe of questions. You peer through a magnifying glass, focusing on the incredibly fine details impressed into the clay. The seal depicts several figures, some human, others unmistakably non-human with elongated features. One prominent image shows a central figure flanked by two others, all gazing up towards a large, radiating celestial body. This body is surrounded by smaller spheres, which some interpret as a representation of our solar system, including planets like Uranus and Neptune that are invisible to the naked eye. Crucially, among these celestial bodies, is a distinct object often interpreted as a winged disk or a flying object, hovering in the sky. Mainstream archaeology interprets these cylinder seals as complex religious or mythological narratives. The celestial body, with radiating lines, is seen as the sun god Shamash, a central deity in Mesopotamian pantheons. The surrounding spheres are interpreted as stylized representations of visible stars or planets known to ancient observers, or purely symbolic elements in a cosmological diagram. The winged disk is a common symbol in ancient Near Eastern iconography, often representing deities, royalty, or the sun itself, a protective symbol or emblem of divine power, not a literal flying object. However, alternative researchers propose that the precise depiction of a celestial system that includes all known planets, some invisible without advanced optics, suggests a level of astronomical knowledge impossible for the Sumerians. They argue that the presence of the distinct, winged disk, alongside these planetary bodies, especially when combined with descriptions of sky gods, or Anunnaki, in Sumerian texts, points to literal observations of flying craft or even extraterrestrial visitors. The striking similarity across continents, where descriptions of flying craft like the Indian Vimanas appear, suggests a shared inspiration for such imagery. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and seemingly impossible astronomical knowledge, and the distinct flying object, depicted on these ancient seals. How did ancient peoples know astronomical facts only confirmed by modern science? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with extraterrestrial technology? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The hushed atmosphere of the museum gallery still embraces you, a sanctuary for the ancient whispers preserved in clay. Your attention now shifts from the intricate visual imagery of the Sumerian cylinder seals to the cuneiform script that often accompanies these depictions. These wedge-shaped impressions, pressed into soft clay millennia ago, represent one of humanity's earliest writing systems, offering a textual counterpoint to the visual mysteries. You closely examine the small, dense tablets and impressions, focusing on the cuneiform texts that detail the attributes and activities of the Sumerian deities, often known as the Anunnaki. These texts describe powerful beings who descended from the heavens, interacting directly with early humanity. They speak of a time when these gods brought knowledge, established cities, and even genetically engineered humans. While the VA243 seal features a celestial object and figures, other seals and tablets provide narrative context, detailing the Anunnaki's presence on Earth, their flying objects, and the distinct, sometimes unusual, physical forms, occasionally depicted with large eyes, wings, or helmets. Mainstream archaeology and philology interpret these cuneiform texts as rich mythological narratives and religious epics. The Anunnaki are understood as a pantheon of gods and goddesses, personifications of natural forces, celestial bodies, or archetypal human qualities, integral to Sumerian spiritual beliefs. Their descent from the heavens is a metaphorical expression of their divine power and transcendent nature, not a literal arrival from outer space. The flying objects are interpreted as symbolic representations of divine presence or celestial phenomena, and their unusual features as iconographic conventions to denote divinity or power, consistent with religious iconography across many cultures. However, alternative researchers propose that a more literal reading of these ancient texts, particularly when combined with the visual evidence on the seals, suggests a different interpretation. They argue that the detailed descriptions of the Anunnaki arriving from the sky, their advanced knowledge, and their seemingly non-human or technologically augmented features, are too specific and consistent to be mere metaphor. They suggest these texts are historical accounts of extraterrestrial visitation or interactions with an advanced pre-civilization who shared knowledge globally. The striking similarity across continents, where sky god narratives and depictions of beings with unusual features are prevalent, reinforces this alternative view. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and detailed descriptions of flying deities and their advanced capabilities in ancient texts, when the known technology of the era was primitive. How did ancient peoples possess such detailed knowledge of beings arriving from the sky, and why did they depict them with such unique features? Are these ancient texts purely mythological, or do they hold a deeper, more literal record of contact? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The hushed environment of a Tokyo museum gallery allows you to focus intimately on a small, ancient clay figurine. This is a Dogū, a type of ceramic figure produced throughout the Jomon period of prehistoric Japan, dating from as early as 10,000 to 300 BC. Among the many styles of Dogū, your attention is drawn to the most distinctive, the goggle-eyed, or snow goggle, type, known for its strikingly unusual facial features. You lean closer, observing the delicate craftsmanship of the clay, feeling the ancient, cool texture. The figurine, typically 8 to 12 inches tall, possesses an exaggerated, almost alien head, dominated by two enormous, oval-shaped eyes, deeply set and outlined, resembling modern snow goggles or specialized eyewear. The body is often bulky and stylized, sometimes with what appear to be segmented or armored sections. Other features like small mouths, or peculiar headgear, add to their distinct, non-human aesthetic. These figures were often intentionally broken, suggesting a ritualistic purpose. Mainstream archaeology interprets Dogū figurines as fertility symbols, representations of goddesses or benevolent spirits, or figures used in healing rituals. The goggle eyes are seen as a stylized artistic convention, perhaps representing the large eyes of an owl, or protective eyewear worn by shamans during ceremonies. The bulky body is often interpreted as depicting pregnancy or a protective garment. This perspective firmly places the Dogū within the spiritual and cultural context of the Jomon people, as indigenous religious iconography, not literal depictions of non-human beings. However, alternative researchers propose that the consistent, anatomically unusual features of the goggle-eyed Dogū, particularly their large, seemingly mechanical eyes and bulky, almost suited bodies, bear an uncanny resemblance to modern depictions of extraterrestrial beings or astronauts in protective gear. They argue that the uniformity of these specific features across various sites and periods, despite changes in other artistic styles, suggests a shared source of inspiration. The striking similarity across continents, where helmeted or goggle-eyed figures appear in other ancient rock art or artifacts, suggests a recurring motif that transcends independent artistic development. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and consistent depiction of figures wearing what appear to be technologically advanced protective gear, predating their known invention by thousands of years. What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of these goggle-eyed beings? Are these depictions metaphorical, or literal documentation of contact with non-human entities? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The quiet hum of the Tokyo Museum surrounds you, drawing your attention back to the enigmatic Dogū figurines. You find yourself considering not just their goggle eyes, but the overall impression of their forms. Many of these prehistoric Japanese figures, especially the later ones, have bodies that appear distinctly non-human, almost as if encased in a shell or a suit. You observe the detailed, segmented patterns on some Dogū bodies, resembling plates or armor. Their limbs are often short, stubby, or stylized, not quite human, yet clearly articulated. The bulkiness of the torso and the peculiar, sometimes segmented, extremities give the impression of a protective suit, an exoskeleton, or even an alien anatomy, rather than a natural human form. This consistency in their unusual morphology, dating back thousands of years across various Jomon sites, prompts deeper reflection. Mainstream archaeology interprets these body forms as highly symbolic representations of goddesses or spirits, where the exaggerated features, the large eyes, the bulky body, signify divinity, fertility, or protection. The segmented patterns are often seen as decorative motifs, tattooing, or stylized clothing, common in indigenous art traditions. The deliberate breaking of Dogū figures in rituals is thought to represent a cycle of destruction and rebirth, or a transference of spiritual power, reinforcing their role as religious iconography within the Jomon culture, not literal depictions of advanced technology or non-human anatomy. However, alternative researchers propose that the consistent depiction of figures with features so strikingly similar to modern protective gear, or even an alien biological structure, challenges a purely symbolic interpretation. They argue that the repeated motifs of goggles and armored or segmented bodies, clearly distinguished from other human figures in ancient art, suggest a literal observation. The presence of technologically advanced protective suits in primitive contexts, thousands of years before their invention, suggests a lost advanced civilization, extraterrestrial visitation, or a globally shared, forgotten knowledge. Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and consistent depiction of anatomically unusual humanoid figures in ancient art. Why do disconnected ancient cultures depict nearly identical symbols of beings in what appear to be helmets or spacesuits? Are these depictions purely symbolic, or literal documentation of contact with advanced visitors or a forgotten past? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The vast, silent expanse of the Gilf Kabir Plateau in the Egyptian Sahara stretches before you, an endless vista of golden sand and rugged rock formations. The scorching desert sun beats down, and the air shimmers with heat. Yet, as you step into the cool, shadowed interior of the Cave of Swimmers, Wadi Sura, a startling sight greets your eyes. Intricate rock paintings, dating back 6,000 to 10,000 years, depicting human figures seemingly swimming in what is now one of the driest places on Earth. You run your hand over the ancient pigments, feeling the smooth, cool rock face. The figures are remarkably detailed, showing humans with outstretched arms and legs, perfectly capturing the fluid motions of swimming or diving. They appear to be surrounded by water, or at least a medium that supports their aquatic activity, contrasting sharply with the barren, hyper-arid desert outside. These prehistoric paintings are not just isolated images. Numerous panels throughout the cave show humans interacting with what appears to be a watery environment, alongside various types of wildlife that would only thrive in a lush landscape. Mainstream archaeology interprets these swimming figures as a profound record of a dramatically different Saharan climate during the African humid period. It suggests that these paintings are a literal documentation of a time when the Sahara was a verdant savanna, dotted with lakes and rivers, supporting diverse flora and fauna, and allowing ancient peoples to engage in aquatic activities. The vivid depictions are seen as a memory of a lost paradise, a testament to the adaptability of early humans, and a crucial piece of evidence for past climate change, not evidence of a global cataclysm. However, alternative researchers propose that while climate change is undeniable, the precision of these depictions, alongside other ancient art showing impossible scenarios, suggests more than just a localized environmental shift. They argue that the presence of such clear, swimming figures, in what is now an extreme desert, combined with worldwide flood myths across disparate cultures, points to a shared, global memory of a catastrophic inundation. Could these paintings represent a record of survival during a worldwide deluge, a shared forgotten knowledge of a planet extensively covered by water? Conventional explanations struggle to fully account for the precise and consistent depiction of aquatic activities in what is now a vast desert, when considered alongside global flood narratives. What did ancient artists actually witness that compelled such specific, repeated imagery of swimming humans in a now dry land? Are these depictions purely local historical records, or do they hint at a deeper, globally shared memory of a water-covered Earth? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? Emerging from the cool embrace of the Cave of Swimmers at Wadi Sura, the harsh, sun-baked reality of the Egyptian Sahara reminds you of the profound change this landscape has undergone. The shimmering heat haze distorts the horizon, making it almost impossible to reconcile the vast, arid desert before you with the vivid aquatic scenes etched into the ancient rock art inside. The rock art, dating back 6,000 to 10,000 years, vividly portrays a verdant, water-rich environment teeming with hippos, crocodiles, and humans engaged in aquatic activities. This stark imagery forces a re-evaluation of what we understand about this desert's past. The paintings are remarkably detailed, capturing the fluid motion of swimmers and the presence of wildlife that could only thrive in a lush environment. The sheer contrast between the ancient depictions and the modern desert is a powerful testament to climatic shifts. Mainstream climatology attributes this phenomenon to the Green Sahara period, or the African humid period. Geological and paleo-environmental evidence, such as lake bed sediments, fossil pollens, and animal remains, corroborates the artistic record, indicating that between approximately 15,000 and 5,000 years ago, shifts in orbital parameters intensified the African monsoon. This transformed the Sahara into a lush savanna of grasslands, forests, and extensive freshwater systems. These paintings are seen as a direct, invaluable ethnographic record of this prosperous epoch, a time of plenty before the desert returned. However, alternative researchers propose that while the Green Sahara is a well-established scientific fact, the global prevalence of cataclysmic flood myths, from Sumerian epics to Native American legends, suggests a broader, shared trauma beyond localized climate shifts. They argue that the sheer number and detailed consistency of these worldwide flood myths, which speak of humanity's near annihilation by water, could be a collective memory of a significant global inundation, perhaps at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago. Could the Cave of Swimmers, therefore, be not just a record of a lush local past, but an echo of a larger, more universal watery event that profoundly impacted early human consciousness and art? Conventional explanations struggle to account for the striking similarity of complex symbols and narratives, like global flood myths, appearing simultaneously in cultures with no known contact, separated by oceans and millennia. How do these disconnected ancient cultures share such specific, repeated imagery and oral traditions of a world reshaped by water? Are these desert paintings merely a record of a localized meteorological phenomenon? Or do they carry a deeper memory of a planet fundamentally transformed by water? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology, awaiting our rediscovery? The vast, ancient city of Teotihuacan, bathed in the soft glow of the Mexican sun, stretches before you. You stand near the Pyramid of the Sun, its monumental stone tiers rising towards the sky, a testament to the advanced architectural and engineering skills of its builders, dating from around 100 BC to 250 AD. Yet, deep within its structure lies an intriguing material anomaly that challenges conventional understanding. You recall archaeological reports detailing the discovery during excavations. Large, thick sheets of mica carefully embedded between layers of the pyramid's construction. This isn't a decorative flourish or a local building material. This mica, a mineral with excellent insulative and heat-resistant properties, was sourced from a mine over 2,000 miles away in present-day Brazil. The sheer effort of transporting such massive quantities over such a distance, and deliberately integrating it into the pyramid's core, raises profound questions about its purpose. Mainstream archaeology interprets the inclusion of mica as a symbolic or ritualistic act, or perhaps a practical one that we don't fully understand. It suggests that the mica, with its shimmering, reflective qualities, may have held spiritual significance, connecting the pyramid to celestial phenomena or deities. Alternatively, it might have been used for some form of structural reinforcement or as a moisture barrier, although its specific properties for insulation and heat resistance are not typically required for pyramid construction. This perspective attributes its use to the rich symbolic and spiritual world of the Teotihuacanos. However, alternative researchers propose that the deliberate and laborious incorporation of such a specific, technologically relevant material, sourced from thousands of miles away, points to a practical rather than purely symbolic function. They argue that mica's properties as an electrical insulator and heat shield are too specific to be coincidental. The presence of technological objects in primitive contexts, like the mica sheets, suggests that the Teotihuacanos, or those who influenced them, might have had an advanced understanding of physics or an unknown technology requiring these properties, perhaps for power generation or a unique structural purpose within the pyramid. Conventional explanations struggle to account for the extraordinary effort involved in acquiring and integrating such a specialized material, when its symbolic or conventional structural benefits seem minimal. Why would an ancient civilization undertake such a monumental task for a seemingly inexplicable purpose? Are these materials purely ceremonial, or do they hint at a deeper, forgotten technological purpose for Teotihuacan's pyramids? What truths might our ancestors have encoded in symbols we dismiss as mythology? The scale of Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun continues to impress, even as your mind grapples with the invisible layers of mica embedded within its colossal structure. You imagine the immense effort required not just to quarry and transport the precious mineral from 2,000 miles away, but to deliberately integrate it into the pyramid's core during its construction, circa 100 BC to 250 AD. The sheer dedication to its inclusion suggests a purpose beyond mere decoration or simple structural reinforcement. You consider the properties of mica, its remarkable ability to withstand high temperatures, its excellent electrical insulating characteristics, and its capacity to block certain forms of radiation. While some mica was used for decorative purposes or in art by various Mesoamerican cultures, the vast sheets found deep within the Pyramid of the Sun are not visible to the eye and appear to serve a hidden, integral function. This deliberate, concealed use of a technologically significant material in a primitive context is the heart of the enigma. Mainstream archaeology largely interprets the mica as having a symbolic or ritualistic purpose, perhaps connected to the sacred mountains, water, or the underworld, reflecting the Teotihuacano's cosmology. Its reflective quality may have been associated with divine light or mystical powers. The difficulty of its procurement is seen as a testament to the pyramid's importance and the wealth of the city, allowing for the acquisition of exotic materials. This perspective generally concludes that while the exact purpose remains elusive, it likely aligns with the religious and ceremonial functions of the pyramid, not an advanced technological